Not every JRPG has to be a jaw-dropping masterpiece that will change your life. It's completely fine if a JRPG is only okay. Here are 10 of the best middle-of-the-road 7 out of 10 JRPGs. When I think back to the JRPGs I grew up with, it's not just the 10 out of 10 masterpieces I remember. It's the ones with those awkward menus, the clunky dialogue, or that one boss that was incredibly difficult for seemingly no reason at all. They weren't perfect. In fact, far from it. But I poured hours into them, I fell in love with the world, and it's because of this that these 7 out of 10 JRPGs mean just as much to me as the masterpieces that overshadow them. This video is for those forgotten favorites, the flawed, the weird, and the wonderfully average JRPGs. So pull up a chair and grab a drink and join me as we shine a light on 10 of the best 7 out of 10 JRPGs. We're going to start off today with IX Setsuna, released for the PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, Nintendo Switch, and PC in 2016. IX Setsuna is one of those games I like to describe as nostalgia bait. It's very clearly inspired by retro games we all grew up with, such as Chrono Trigger, and that's especially noticeable in the combat. But IX Setsuna differs with the melancholic tone that the piano score and environment provides. All of IX Setsuna takes place in a snow-covered world, and while this might seem like something that's just a simple design choice, but it actually feeds into the whole environment and experience of IX Setsuna. Have you ever been outside after a fresh snowstorm? Everything is quiet, isolated, and has that air of calm sadness. IX Setsuna is a very sad game as a whole. The entire premise focuses on a girl on a pilgrimage to sacrifice herself to save the world. This is very familiar JRPG territory. Yeah, we've seen it in heavy hitters like Tales of Symphonia or Final Fantasy X. But the way that IX Setsuna tells the story feels almost meditative, and it really gives you a unique experience. As I mentioned previously, the combat is very familiar. In fact, it's almost identical to Chrono Trigger, right down to double and triple combo text between the characters. However, you can press buttons at just the right time to increase damage or increase some healing. It adds a bit of engagement with the combat system to keep things fresh. As for the music, it's all incredibly minimal. There's no high-octane combat themes or mind-blowing orchestral symphonies. It's all very calm, but somehow it really works. Now, this all sounds amazing, but why doesn't it hit that 10 out of 10 mark? Well, while it's incredibly charming and emotional, it struggles a lot with repetition. The environments, while beautiful, are all incredibly similar and begin to blur together after a while. Snow-covered mountains, snow-covered forests, snowy caves, there just isn't enough variety. On top of that, the enemy variety is somewhat thin. You'll be fighting the same 10 or so monsters throughout the entire game with recolors. The side quests, they're very sparse until the end of the game, and the gameplay systems feel almost like they don't fully evolve and are cut short. The game starts strong, but quickly overstays its welcome, which honestly is kind of impressive, considering the game only lasts about 20 or so hours. Furthermore, the game plays it far too safe and doesn't really take any risks, which results in it just feeling like a more modern echo of Chrono Trigger. It doesn't have a personality of its own, and for that reason, it doesn't stand out as much as it could. Still, with that being said, if you grew up with games like Chrono Trigger, Lufia 2, or Final Fantasy VI, IX Setsuna will scratch that nostalgic itch just right, even if it is only a 7 out of 10. Star Ocean Integrity and Faithlessness is one of those games that tries to be great, but for every step it takes forward, it tends to take 2 or 10 steps back. However, despite all of its flaws, and there's a lot of them, it still has that charm that the Star Ocean franchise is known for, and is one of the better sci-fi JRPGs available in the current day and age. Star Ocean 5's combat is fast-paced and flashy, and all enhanced with some amazing music by Motoi Sakuraba. However, it can get a bit chaotic because while typically Star Ocean games make you pick 3 or 4 party members to fight in combat, Star Ocean throws that out the window and throws every single party member into battle at once. That's 7 characters, all using spells and chaining special moves together, dashing all over the place at the same time. It can get pretty crazy and visually overstimulating at times, but funny enough, it still happens to run smooth as butter. The cast is pretty great too, but it's incredibly unbalanced. The main hero, Fidel, is more bland and boring than a bucket of nails. But then you have characters like Miki, Victor, and Fiore that are incredibly fun and breathe life into the game. Star Ocean 5 leans into the traditional setting of Star Ocean, with high-tech civilizations clashing with medieval worlds. While the concept is compelling, it really has a tendency to fail on the execution. So with all that being said, what exactly prevents it from hitting the fabled 10 out of 10? Well, honestly, there's a lot that prevents Star Ocean 5 from being amazing and perfect. Firstly, the story structure. You know when you're playing a JRPG and how every now and then you have wonderfully directed cutscenes with camera angles and the like? Well, cutscenes are integrated directly into the game and are told in real time. They don't feel significant, and I can't count how many times I thought it was just fun banter as opposed to important story content. It feels very disjointed, and I missed a lot of key moments as a result. And then there's the world design. What would you expect from an epic space opera? Visiting planets, maybe? Epic space battles? Aliens? Well, in Star Ocean 5, you're mostly stuck on a single planet, and you run back and forth between the same 5 or 6 areas, leading to a lot of repetition and next to no exploration. Add in the strange difficulty curve, reused assets, and a plot that ends before it even gets started, it's clear that Star Ocean 5 could have been that much better if it just lived up to its own potential. Seriously, Star Ocean 5 can be completed, main game, and post-game within about 20 to 25 hours. With that being said, if you enjoy futuristic sci-fi JRPGs with a crazy combat system as well as, well, I'll be honest, that's about it. Star Ocean 5 is not as terrible as everyone says, but it doesn't reach that level that Star Ocean is known for. But still, you'll enjoy it if you're looking for a low-budget, 7 out of 10 space opera adventure. I've talked about the Bravely series before, probably more than I should have, about how much I adore the games in the series, and Bravely Default 2, while it doesn't quite hit the same level, it's still quite good. Bravely Default 2 brings back that old school classic Final Fantasy feel, but modernizes it. You have a world built around elemental crystals, a party of heroes chosen by fate, and a job system that lets you experiment to your heart's content. Honestly, the job system is what makes this game so great. From White Mage to Phantom to Gambler, mixing and matching classes to find broken combos is incredibly satisfying. As I've mentioned several times on this channel, job systems are like my bread and butter. It's one JRPG mechanic that perks up my ears like a prairie dog. Bravely Default 2 brings back the Brave and Default system from the previous games in the franchise. Banking and borrowing turns in battle breeds strategy and creativity, and encounters, especially bosses, will punish lazy strategies, preventing you from just using that one tried and true strategy throughout the entire game. So this all sounds amazing. Why isn't it a 10 out of 10? Well, the main offender is the story of the game. It's too familiar. It leans into Final Fantasy tradition. Collect crystals, be chosen by the crystals as the hero of light, and save the world. At this point, it's incredibly generic, and unlike traditional Final Fantasies, there really aren't any memorable emotional arcs to attach you to those characters. By the time you reach the end of the game, you'll be thinking, this was good, but really, it wasn't all that great. Then you have the pacing. Once you hit mid-game, it'll feel like you're just running through a hamster wheel. It follows the same story structure. Find town, witness problem in town, fight boss, find out boss was working under someone else, fight big boss, and move on. The quest system is also kind of bland. It's a lot of go talk to this person, go fight this enemy, or find this item an NPC dropped. It definitely doesn't help that you can't track your quests either. Dungeons are not very creative, it's mostly a bunch of maze-like corridors without enough visual variety. And on top of that, you have the equipment system. Bravely Default 2 introduces a weight system. Your characters can equip anything. You could have a white mage that uses a shield and a sword. However, you have a weight limit. Once you exceed that weight limit, your stats begin to drop. So something like, say, a knight might have a higher weight limit than a white mage. This is kind of interesting because it makes you think about what to buy. It's no longer just go into a shop, buy the highest stat items, and carry on. Some people might kind of enjoy that because, now it's not just simple brain dead buying equipment. However, it can get a bit annoying because sometimes you'll have to determine, okay, I want magic defense, so now I have to equip these lighter, higher magic defense items as opposed to physical defense. It's a little bit strange, but I wasn't a huge fan of it. Lastly, I want to talk about the difficulty spikes. They're very, very apparent. Some bosses you will breeze through and have next to no difficulty with, and later on some of the bosses rely almost on guessing the correct combination of jobs and skill sets in order to beat that boss. It kind of defeats the purpose of a job system when the developers obviously designed a boss around a specific build. This is proven time and time again when you have bosses that counter certain abilities to prevent you from using them. Still, with all this being said, if you're a fan of the classic generic Final Fantasy Crystal story archetype and job systems, Bravely Default 2 will be right down your alley. I'll take this time to mention I'm currently working on a full review of Bravely Default 2, so if that's something you're looking forward to, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it. Sea of Stars is one of the most visually stunning indie JRPGs in years, so it isn't hard to see why it garnered so much attention. The pixel art was gorgeous, had a soundtrack with a guest star from Yasunori Mitsuda of Chrono Trigger fame. It's no wonder Sea of Stars felt as if it was right from the golden age of 16-bit JRPGs. Yes, I'm aware it's not actually a JRPG because it was developed in Canada, but I'm still going along with the sense that JRPG is a type of RPG and not necessarily where it comes from. But anyways, combat is another aspect that feels incredibly similar to Chrono Trigger, with aspects of Super Mario RPG or Paper Mario. Pressing buttons at just the right time increase the effect of certain moves, keeping you engaged while still keeping that turn-based gameplay that we all know and love. However, with all of the great aspects Sea of Stars has, it lacks that polish to give it a solid 10 out of 10. The biggest issue that Sea of Stars has is its story. Starts like classic JRPG. Two siblings that are training to save the world against great evil. But honestly, that's all it really had going for it. The story never deepens to something unique. It has a great premise, but it never really shines. The main characters are the same way. They're basically just clones of one another. Sure, one is more grounded and the other is more rambunctious, but they don't develop at all. Some of the supporting characters are more interesting, sure, but they also don't evolve much. Outside of Garl. Garl is really the only character that saves this game. I did mention the combat earlier, but the combat is incredibly shallow. When you start the game and learn the combat, it seems like it's amazing and unique. However, the combat hits its peak incredibly early. Generally in a JRPG, you spend most of the game gaining new skills, progressively getting more powerful. Unfortunately, in Sea of Stars, you reach your max potential only a few hours into the game. With each character only having 4 or so different techs and a few combo techs between the characters, it really just leads to you spamming the same moves over and over again. Not to mention the break system, where you need to use certain attacks to cancel an enemy's attack. However, more often than not, you just don't have the turns to fully break an enemy, which kind of ruins the whole concept. Lastly, we have those dungeons. They're pretty unique, but the flow usually ends with push a block, hit a switch, fight enemies, and repeat. The gameplay flow just doesn't evolve. Still, with that being said, Sea of Stars is absolutely worth playing if you love JRPGs from the era of the SNES, but want something that feels a bit more modern. While it isn't a perfect 10 out of 10, it's still quite amazing, and is everything you could possibly ask for from a game to emulate that era. And sometimes, that's really all you need. Final Fantasy XV was easily one of the most ambitious Final Fantasy titles. However, with ambition often comes division, and that's exactly what it did with the fanbase. Some people adore Final Fantasy XV, and others really dislike it. With the Royal Edition, it added new story scenes, gameplay tweaks, and quality of life enhancements. Honestly, this is the version we should have gotten at launch, but even with all that polish, the game still hovers in that awkward realm of 7 out of 10. What Final Fantasy XV gets right, it really gets right. The world of Eos is stunning. Traveling down the highway in your car, the vast plains, dense forests, and those strange ruins. They're everything you'd ask for in a fantasy RPG. The bond between Prince Noctis and his friends Gladiolus, Prompto, and Ignis is incredibly emotional. It just feels like 4 bros taking a camping trip. Seriously, roasting weenies, taking selfies, fishing, and getting closer and closer as friends really gives the game some real feeling. The combat, while action-based, is incredibly flashy. You can warp around the battlefield, do combo attacks, toss magic grenades, and the like. It's a spectacle to look at, and I had a lot of fun with it. However, this is not a 10 by any means necessary. It's a solid average experience, and first of all, the story as a whole feels incredibly, fragmented. Even with the Royal Edition, including the DLC, you need to put far too much effort just to understand the story. you have to watch the Kingsglaive anime movie just to understand the premise. Key points of the story tend to happen off screen or even in downloadable content. Worst of all, character arcs feel incomplete, especially with Noctis and Lunafreya. This is largely due to their DLC stories being cancelled post-launch. Devs, let this be a lesson. Do not sell key story or character arcs as DLC. It 100% ruins the game. JRPGs should be all-encompassed. Do not sell them in bits and pieces or throughout different pieces of media. It doesn't work. As I mentioned before, while the world looks gorgeous, it's so empty. Most of it is spent sitting in your car for ages and just letting the game auto-drive you to the next city, which is kind of bland. However, you do get to listen to classic Final Fantasy soundtracks while you do, so admittedly, that's kind of awesome. As for the quests, they're unimaginative. They're largely fetch quests with next to no addition to the whole plot. The tone of the game can also shift rapidly. One moment you might be sitting on a dock, fishing, but then 2 minutes later you're fighting a thunder god. It suddenly changes with almost no buffer in between. Still, Final Fantasy 15 is pretty fun, even if it isn't something you'd expect from one of the biggest JRPG franchises in the world. It's not perfect, it's not traditional, but the personal feeling journey is iconic. For as messy as the game is, it's kinda unforgettable, and that's why even as a 7 out of 10, it's absolutely worth playing. Fairy Tail is a game that for all intents and purposes completely understands its audience. If you fell in love with the anime, this game is almost like a family reunion. The character models look like they're pulled directly from the anime. The voice acting, while only Japanese unfortunately, is amazing. The story hits all those arcs you know and love, from the Tenro Island saga to Tartarus, while adding a bit of original scenes. You might be thinking that this sounds like it's just a game for fan service, and while largely that is true, it does feature a turn-based grid combat system that's fun and engaging. Each character is largely focused around a specific elements. You have all the signature attacks, like Natsu's Fire Dragon Roar or Urza's armor transformations. With the flashy animations and combo potential, it adds a light, and I do mean a light, layer of strategy to keep fights fun. With all this said, Fairy Tail is very much so a game with a very limited budget. The world is broken into these tiny disconnected zones with no real exploration. Towns and dungeons are just boring and have almost no interactivity. And despite the game being a JRPG, you have next to no customization, completely limited to just leveling up for new skills that are predetermined. Sure, the game does have side quests, but they're some of the most repetitive side quests I've ever experienced. It's full of go here, fight this thing, and come back for very, 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 very minor rewards. Honestly, if it wasn't for me being a trophy hunter back when I played this, I wouldn't even have bothered with them because they don't add anything of value. If you aren't already invested in the Fairy Tail universe, this game really does nothing to pull you in or explain the setting to you. It assumes you already know and care about it. However, if you do care, and you've already spent hundreds upon hundreds of hours consuming the manga or anime, then Fairy Tail delivers exactly what you might be looking for. A faithful, energetic adaptation of the anime with just enough meat on its bones to make it worth playing. It's not groundbreaking, and it definitely isn't polished, but if you're a fan of the series, you're sure to have a blast. And that, if I do say so myself, makes it a worthwhile 7 out of 10. Pokemon Sword and Shield have to be some of the most controversial mainline games in the Pokemon franchise. Set in the Galar region, heavily inspired by the United Kingdom, the duology offers some of the coolest gym battles in the franchise. Great music, cheering crowds, huge stadiums. Not even exaggerating, those Dynamax themes are on another level. The new Pokemon designs can be pretty great. Corviknight, Dragapult, and Toxtricity have to be some of my favorites. And the wild area was nice in the sense that it was finally a fresh idea for the series. An open free roaming zone with changing weather and roaming Pokemon. Not to mention those raid battles against super powerful Pokemon that encourage co-op play in a way we hadn't seen before. As a whole, Pokemon Sword and Shield evolved the series in a way we had never seen before. It was a welcome change, especially for longtime fans of the series. And if you were new, it was incredibly accessible. This is a great entry point. But yeah, a 10 out of 10, this is not. The main issue that stands out is you don't get a full national Pokedex. There were so many Pokemon missing from Sword and Shield, and a lot of the mechanics, such as Mega Evolutions and Z-moves, were scrapped and replaced with the Dynamax system, which, while awesome and epic, kind of lacks the depth of previous battle gimmicks. It gets old quick and promotes repeated grinding. The story of Pokemon Sword and Shield is fine, but that's all it is. It gets bland, with no memorable moments. The rival characters are not very interesting either, and the evil team really isn't that threatening. In fact, it's more annoying than anything. As for the world building, it's just not there. It hints at a deeper lore, like ancient kings, Dynamax energy, and strange and mysterious Pokemon, but it never commits to exploring them. Could you imagine going on a safari and they talk about this amazing mythological beast? You're super hyped about it, but then they just completely move on to something else 2 minutes later and never mention it again? Yeah, that's basically what Sword and Shield is like. Lastly, there's the presentation. Sword and Shield has an amazing art direction, but the graphics themselves feel incredibly dated with boring textures, bland animations, and lifeless environments. It's almost as if this was a 3DS game that at the last moment they're like, hey, let's put this on Switch instead, as opposed to a Pokemon game that was designed exclusively for the Switch. Here's the thing though, Pokemon Sword and Shield is still fun. It's still Pokemon, it's monster collecting comfort food. Is it the best in the series? Not even close. But it's a solid, fun, replayable JRPG that gives you the great Pokemon magic you grew to love, which makes it one of those 7 out of 10 bangers that you need to play. Reynatis was one of those games that had everything going for it. You had modern day urban fantasy, flashy high-speed action combat, and an art style and atmosphere that was like nothing else you had ever seen. Even if the execution left something to be desired, set in the gritty fantasy version of modern day Shibuya, the game throws you into a world where magic is illegal, and the Reynatis, or magic users, are hunted and forced into hiding. Seems like a perfectly intriguing setting right from the get-go. What sets Reynatis apart from everything else is its combat. It's quick and snappy with a focus on parrying. It's somewhat similar to something like, say, Nier Automata, flipping through the air, chaining your magic attacks, just dashing everywhere. It feels so satisfying when you perfect guard and counter with your combo of choice. It gets deeper the further you progress into the game and unlock more abilities. But this is the pinnacle of a 7 out of 10 JRPG. The story premise, while it's promising, never quite delivers. You have all of these fascinating themes. Oppression, identity, dual lives, but the characters just don't develop, and the narrative arcs, they fall flat. The pacing is also an issue. You have these 40-minute cutscenes followed by 2 minutes of gameplay, and then the chapter just ends. No boss, no actual fighting. It's honestly kind of exhausting. You didn't really earn the plot, it just kind of gives it to you. The world was something I was super excited for. It was a moody, dark world, but it just lacks interactivity. Shibuya looks downright amazing, but it's empty. The exploration is limited, and the side quests contribute absolutely nothing to the lore or story. They're the equivalent of helping an old grandma cross a busy road, only to never see her again. The game, of course, is also kind of janky, the camera is downright awful, the menus are a chore to navigate, and the technical side of things, it just doesn't run all that well. Still, for an action JRPG, it's stylish. And moody, if not a bit experimental. Reynatis is worth checking out, but maybe wait for a sale. It's quite flawed, but even with all the misses, you can't help but respect what it's trying to accomplish. A stylish and story-driven 7 out of 10 if there ever was one. Tales of Berseria. Don't rip me a new one for this, please. As a longtime Tales fan, this entry is aggressively a 7 out of 10 experience. Lately, I've noticed a lot of people considering this as one of their favorite Tales games, and I respect that. It has a lot of positives to raise it up to those ranks. One thing that really stands out, as far as Tales is concerned, is the tone of Berseria. Most Tales games are bright and cheerful, where Berseria is a bona fide revenge tale. It's bitter, it's grim, and if I do say so myself, it's deeply personal. You play the role of Velvet Crow. She's just so different than your typical Tales hero. Instead of saving the world, she kind of wants to burn down the whole world after a huge amount of betrayal. Dark JRPGs are not as common these days, so this was a welcome change. The linear motion battle system isn't exactly linear anymore. It's dubbed as the Liberation battle system. You can now run in any direction you want, and you can combo anything into anything. It's actually kind of fun and breeds creativity as far as your combos are concerned. As for the characters, I feel like Tales of Berseria has one of the strongest casts available. None of your characters really are traditional heroes. They're all more morally gray. You have former prisoners, you have demons, and you have outcasts, all drawn together by this common mission. This makes the skits and banter absolute gold. I laughed way more than I should have. However, it's time to get into why Tales of Berseria only lands in the 7 or 8 range when it comes to the JRPGs. Firstly, that dungeon design. It feels uninspired. Most of them are just flat, repetitive corridors with basic puzzles, if they can even be considered puzzles in the first place. There's no reward to exploration, and the towns are lifeless, save for maybe 1 or 2 of them. Visually, Tales of Berseria is dull. Originally, it was released on the PlayStation 3 and then ported to the PlayStation 4. You can easily tell. The textures are low res, the animations are stiff, and the environment is barren, especially when you compare it to other PlayStation 4 games. Pacing feels a bit off as well. While the story is brilliant, even if it feels like it was ripped off from Berserk, you kind of have to push through so much filler just to get to the best parts. With this being said, what Berseria does well, the characters, the emotions, and the themes, it does exceedingly well. So well that it overshadows the flaws that the game has. Ideally, this game would be perfect for someone that is tired of typical JRPG over-optimism and wants something a little more dark and evil. If that's something that you'd like, this 7 out of 10 journey is worth taking. IX Monstrum Nox is a game that easily surprises you. Not because it's flawless, but because it's weird, but kind of weird in all the right ways. Like every Ys title, it's stylish, fast, and packed with a unique personality, even if it doesn't reach that level of the series' best. I love the Ys series and I always have, so call me a bit biased, but still, while it isn't the best, it's everything a 7 out of 10 game should be. Once again, Adol Kristen, our titular main hero, takes the stage, our eternal adventurer. But this time, he's cursed and trapped in the prison city of Balduke. Shortly after the game begins, you're transformed into a monstrum, kind of a superhero with weird powers, and joined by others that have been cursed in the same way. What makes IX so great is how traversal has been substantially enhanced, and with the ability to zip lines between points or run up walls, IX introduces a sense of verticality to the exploration now. It feels nice to expand the exploration in the city of Balduke. As for the combat, it's pretty similar to the predecessors. It's quick and it's fun. The system has been refined since Ys 7, and with each entry it gets a little bit better. You can use the monster movement abilities in battle, so it adds a bit more fun as opposed to just mash attack until your special move is available, rinse, and repeat. You can juggle enemies and hit weaknesses left and right, teleport to your enemies, and so on. I had a lot of fun with IX, and I can't talk about Ys without mentioning the music. The music is some of the best the series has ever seen. Cloaca Maxima is still one of my favorites that Falcom has ever composed. So why exactly is this game a 7 out of 10 when I said I had so much fun with it and have seemingly nothing but positive things to say about it? The biggest aspect is Balduke itself. Ys is a series about adventuring and exploration. In Ys 9, for 90% of the game, you're stuck within the city walls. Sure, there are caves and catacombs, but you're still very limited on where you can explore. That just goes against everything Ys is known for. I wasn't a huge fan, and it felt lackluster at times. As for the graphics, they aren't that great. You have plenty of frame rate issues, and the textures feel very dated. Every new section makes you realize that Falcom is not a AAA developer, and while we don't play Ys for stellar graphics, it kinda dampens the experience a tad. This brings us to the story. Well, it has its great moments, especially when it dives into the stories of each of the Monstrum's personal arcs. The main plot can feel kinda convoluted and slow. The lore dumping and pacing issues can be concerning. The story also relies on the fact that you've played the majority of the games at this point, especially Ys 5. Seriously, the story of Ys 5 is actually a very key element of Ys 9. And let's be honest, no one should ever play Ys 5 because it's the only game in the series that I would consider bad. Now, with all that being said, if you're into fast action, fun characters, and a soundtrack that is almost impossible to beat, Ys 9 absolutely delivers. Ys 9 isn't trying to be the next Final Fantasy or Persona game. It's its own unique beast, and that's what makes it special. Rough edges and all, Ys 9 is the best 7 out of 10 that ever 7'd out of 10'd. So there you have it. 10 JRPGs that might not be perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but still deserve to be played and enjoyed. Sometimes a 7 out of 10 is exactly what you're in the mood for. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more JRPG lists and reviews, and ding that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Do you have your own favorite flawed but fantastic JRPG? Be sure to drop it in the comments. I try to respond to as many comments as possible. And hey, if you're still craving more JRPG content, check this video out. Trust me, it's a good one. This has been Janky. Thanks so much for watching, and until next week's video, have a wonderful day.